Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of EvolutionFM. I thought I could take this opportunity to introduce the show and introduce myself. My name is Scott Britton, and for the past 4 years, I have been absolutely immersed and obsessed with understanding human consciousness and exploring the growth of my own consciousness. Now, if you would have told me that consciousness and its evolution was correlated to human evolution, I probably would have had no idea what you were talking about. In fact, I probably would have thought human evolution to be that picture of monkeys gradually getting bigger into a person. And that was kind of it. And maybe we would build some cool technology. But a few things happened to me 4 years ago, which I'll talk about in a minute, that really made me realize that the evolution of man, the evolution of humanity is an inward process. And as one evolves on their own inward journey, the reality, this world that we find ourselves in, and the potentialities of your experience and what is possible for humans changes in accordance with that inward growth. I know all this might be a little strange or surprising to some of you. That's totally okay. We're going to cover a lot of these concepts in the show, both from my own learnings as well as bringing on and introducing guests and experts to really help us understand these topics. One of the things and challenges that I've had on this spiritual journey is we live in a time where there's more information, more books, more podcasts. I know I'm making a podcast, more videos, all telling us what to do and how to evolve and what we can do to grow personally and spiritually. And sometimes it just can be downright confusing. And so my hope is to expose through stories, through personal accounts, different parts of this journey so that you can see yourself in it. And you can go, wait a second, that's me. Maybe there's something to be learned here. Maybe there's something I can do to apply to my own life to help me in my own spiritual journey. So to talk a little bit more about my own journey as kind of an introduction and container for episode 1, maybe we can start with today. I currently live in Austin, Texas. I was not born in Texas. I was born on the East Coast outside of Philadelphia. Go Eagles. And I didn't really get involved in any of this spiritual stuff up until about 4 years ago. All of this happened while I was running my company, Troops, which we started 7.5 years ago. We recently sold the business to Salesforce. And in the midst of that startup experience of doing a venture-backed startup where we had raised $20 million, I started to have all of this spiritual stuff that I never anticipated happening in my life that really changed my perspective. About 4 years ago, I was just getting out of a long relationship. Up until this point in time, I'd never really experimented with things like plant medicine or even, frankly, smoked weed. But I had just gotten out of this long relationship, and for some reason, a friend of mine reached out and said, hey, do you want to do ayahuasca? And I said, yes. And prior to that, I've heard of the medicine. I'd heard of the substance. If you don't know what it is, it's basically 2 roots from the Amazon of different trees that are mixed together. When they're mixed together, some special things happen. You ingest it kind of like a shot, and have this really deep, incredible inward experience. And although I wasn't interested in doing what our society calls drugs at the time, I did notice that amongst a lot of really interesting, successful entrepreneurs, which was really the archetype and persona of people that I looked up to, many of them had said, I had this profound experience. It changed how I see myself in the world. And that change has persisted. And that persisted change of perspective was what intrigued me. And I was feeling a little bit lost, year 3.5 into my startup and looking for a change. I felt like the entirety of my life up until that point was all about trying so hard. It was about striving. It was about making the most of myself, being the best version of me, the best I can be. And I went hard at that for years. And to be honest, that served me for a long time. But when it came to developing that inner peace and inner joy and inner love of life in the midst of running this startup and being in this relationship and all these other things in New York City, I lost that. I lost that childlike joy. I lost that love of life. I lost that laughter. And so I thought maybe this could help bring me back. And so I ended up having the experience. We had a shaman fly out to New Jersey, of all places, in an Airbnb. And those 2 nights were some of the most magical experiences I've ever had. I felt like my body was able to shake out all of this tightness that was preventing me from laughing like a freaking kid. I'm talking belly laughing. And I also had an experience where I saw the foundational moments in my life that caused me to believe certain things about myself that weren't actually true. And it was like I was stuck in this loop because of this one imprint. And I later learned a lot more about this concept of programming and conditioning, but the idea and the ability for me to see what caused it, it was like I was able to get rid of it instantly and affect change in my life. And I also felt a sense of love and joy and connection to a higher power that I had never had before. I grew up going to church. I'd sit there and I would kind of wait for it to be over. And I would go so that, the big guy wouldn't look down on me when I died. That was kind of my model of religion and spirituality. I'd never actually had a spiritual transcendent experience. And that is what this provided me. Now, after you have these type of experiences, you go back into your normal life and you have this feeling of, oh my God, everything's different. This is my life now. I believe all these amazing things about myself and I'm happy and I'm joyous. And then inevitably, as Ram Dass and many other spiritual leaders talk about when they talk about plant medicine, you come back down to reality. And this little things that used to bother you, the triggers, all of that stuff comes back into your experience. And so I found myself having this incredible high and this incredible low and wanting to get that high again, wanting to feel that love again inside of myself that colored my entire experience of reality and all my relationships. And so wouldn't you know it, a friend of mine reaches out and says, hey, do you want to do ayahuasca again 4 months later? And being the entrepreneur and controlling person that I was like, oh yeah, this is a good thing. It's a new quarter. Let's go do the ayahuasca. And so I flew down to Austin, Texas, had a transformative experience again, this time a little bit different. On the last night, I had this energy surging through my body for 6 hours. If it doesn't sound fun, it's because it wasn't fun. It was actually really freaking hard. But this was the start of an energy awakening in me that I didn't understand at the time. I thought it was my body shaking out trauma. But the crazy thing is a couple weeks after in deep meditation, that energy started surging through me again. And it started to surge through me every single time I quieted my mind. And at first I thought, okay, maybe this is just some residue. But when this started to happen 5 to 15 times a day when I was on Zoom calls and all these other things, I got seriously concerned. It was kind of like, what the hell is going on? Did I screw myself up? I remember getting really nervous that I potentially damaged myself doing ayahuasca. And like many of us do, it got to a point where I finally worked up the courage to Google what was going on with me. And when I Googled it, I found a core thread that talked about Kundalini energy and how psychedelics could awaken this in someone. And they described the symptomology of someone that had this experience. And what do you know? It matched my symptomology. And so I started reading all about Kundalini energy. It turns out that I was going to visit my parents a week or two later. I went down there and I showed them what was happening to me because I didn't think anybody would believe me if I told them that I was spontaneously shaking with energy unless I showed them. So I showed them, they got all nervous. Long story short, I went to a bunch of Western doctors. Got tested for all types of things. I got a 36-hour brain study on me while I was shaking. No one could tell me anything. There were no answers. And I found this to be very frustrating and very scary. This all compulsed me to start to look at the different Eastern medicines and traditions. At the time, I really had no intention to become a spiritual person. I had been meditating since I was 23 years old, but I really saw that as more of a stress reduction technique, as something that would make me less of an asshole. I didn't see it as a way to connect with God and connect with myself. So yeah, I just was really trying to figure out what the heck was going on with me. And because Kundalini was associated with some of these Eastern traditions, I thought maybe there would be answers there. And I did all the things. I did Kundalini yoga. I was doing breath work. I was doing therapy. I was doing everything. And I finally found a teacher that could explain to me what was happening to me in my body and what was happening to me in my psyche and perspective of the world and myself in it. I started to work with this teacher about close to 3 years ago and started to learn about the self-concept and started to actually become the witness of my experience versus thinking that my thoughts and my emotions were me. I became the watcher of those. And as I became the watcher of those, I started to notice there were certain patterns and beliefs and things that were not serving me, that I had inherited from society, that childhood, different memories, different things that I was completely unaware of. And I started to just kind of see this Scott construct for what it was, which was a construct. Now, I know that might sound crazy, but it became very clear and apparent that my identity was just a bunch of ideas and that there actually was this much deeper, everlasting, infinite identity behind that. And when I was resting in that infinite self, there was nothing but peace. There was nothing but love. And since I've been doing this work, my goal has to been kind of almost on a continuum, increasingly occupy that space for as long as I can in the duration of a day, until that seat of unconditional love for all things is permanent. And I cannot claim to be there today, but I can claim to have grown immensely in the duration and the joy and the love that I feel on this path. And it's because of that I'm so passionate about exploring it, about helping others, about sharing it with people in a way that tells you all of the shit that happens, because it really isn't all just easy and simple and straightforward. Though it can be. It can be a lot easier than it was for me, maybe for you, which is why we're here. The other thing that I started to notice is I started to see that there was a clear kind of evolutionary set of stages that one experiences. There are a number of amazing authors that have written about this. These ideas are not my own. I've built upon the ideas of amazing people like David Hawkins, who wrote Letting Go in the Map of Consciousness, Ken Wilber, who wrote The Spectrum of Consciousness. The folks at Mind Valley have put out some interesting things on this. There's spiral dynamics. There are people before me that have talked about this, and they've laid out the stages of what it feels like to be a human as you evolve your internal consciousness or your perspective of reality and your place in it. And about a year ago, I kind of saw the whole picture. I kind of saw, whoa, wait a second. This is where I was. This is where I thought I was. This is where I was striving. I thought it was my thoughts and emotions. I thought, I was just all these ideas and had to make it. And then wait a second, this is where I really started to believe in myself. And then this is where I started to not try to fight with life and surrender to life. And this is where I had further realization about the fact that I am life, and you can be one with it. And in that oneness comes unconditional peace and love. And so it's almost like your reality is impacted immensely by your perception of self. And that to me is part of the evolution of consciousness. And as that perception of self changes, what you notice is that the synchronicities of life and the time from intent to actualization in reality change as well. As you realize you are creating life, you create life. And it has to be accordant with the level of self-awareness or consciousness. And so as I've embarked on this, I mean, frankly, just nothing is more interesting. And what I feel like doesn't exist, or what I want to see in the world, not because I want to be an important person or any of this bullshit I used to care about, but mainly just because I freaking love talking about it, is bringing a lot of these ancient teaching and understanding in the context of being a young person in the kind of building companies, starting a family, living in this modern Western life. You know, what can be expected? How do we have to do? Where can we go? These are some of the topics that I'm so excited to talk about. And, you know, coming from a technology background, seeing some of these, I just read David Eisenstein, I think his name is, some new guy I've been reading, talked about reunion technology, with the idea that these technologies help bring us back to the understanding of who we are all along, who we were. And so I'm really excited as well to explore how digitizing some of these modalities and democratizing access is changing the world, to explore psychedelics and emergent medicine, to explore some of these wisdom teachings from great beings that are alive today, and see how those wisdom teachings affect our institutions, our medicine, all of the things that define our society. So I'm really excited about all of these things. I'm really excited to do my own fact finding and to bring anyone who this kind of idea resonates with along for the ride. And so that's what this show is about. If it sounds interesting, I encourage you to listen, to subscribe, to check it out. We're going to be putting on video episodes on YouTube, also on all the podcast channels as well. And look, this is just a big experiment, and I hope it's one that can be inclusive of the things that everyone listening is wanting to hear. So let me know, reach out to me, because this isn't just about me. This is about the collective of humanity finding more peace, more joy, more love, and more unity in simultaneous accordance with that. So thank you very much for listening. I'm very excited, and I'll see you on episode number 2, I guess.